Despite our celebrity status, we were still naive. We had no sophistication or sense of style. Back in Liverpool, our idea of a classy night out had been a Scotch and Coke or a Babycham in the pub. Even those were saved for Christmas or birthdays. Mostly we had beer or Coke, and that was it. We hardly ever dined out, and on rare occasions when we had enough money to go to a restaurant, it was a curry house or a cafe for chicken and chips. When John and I had first arrived in London, we'd asked Brian Epstein to show us the ropes. He was already installed in a smart London flat in upmarket Belgravia, and he wasted no time in acquainting himself with the best people and places. It was exciting to be part of the swinging London set, but it highlighted my insecurities. While John took it with ease, I was painfully aware of my lack of sophistication. I saw myself as a naive girl who had simply got lucky and didn't deserve to be there. Also, in the presence of so much glamour and beauty, I was acutely conscious of my imperfections. I did my best to overcome my fears and doubts. Shopping in all the top places, I bought gorgeous outfits, had my hair done in a little Greek place in Bayswater, made every effort to look good, but I still lacked confidence in my appearance. It hadn't mattered so much when John and I were in Liverpool. In those days we had only had eyes for each other, and with my black Bordeaux outfits and new blonde hair, I felt I was the height of glamour. Now, surrounded by rake-thin models and actresses who made their living from looking gorgeous, I could see temptation for John all around us, and felt I couldn't compete. I did a pretty good job of keeping my insecurity under wraps, but there were moments when it got the better of me. On one particularly vulnerable evening, we were at a housewarming party given by Cilla Black and her husband Bobby, who had just moved to London. Cilla was now in Brian's management stable and was becoming a big star. She had been the first girl to hit #1 since Helen Shapiro. The party was swarming with the up-and-coming and the famous. Late in the evening, Cilla walked into the bedroom, after we'd all had a lot to drink, to find Georgie Fame talking to the closed door of her wardrobe. "Come on out, Cyn," he begged. "What's the matter?" "I'll come out when John realises I've gone missing," I told him cheerfully. Cilla, panicking at the thought of the imminent ruin my drunken state might mean for her expensive dresses hanging neatly around me, helped him coax me out and took me off for another drink. John, talking to a crowd of people in another part of the house, never did notice that I'd gone missing. One evening, not long after we moved to Kenwood, there was a knock at the door. John answered, and I stood not far behind him. Bob and Sonny, the Beatles photographer and his wife, who had lived below us in Emperor's Gate, were on the doorstep. Bob looked furious, and Sonny, a stunning Swede, was in tears, cowering behind him. Bob ignored me and said he wanted to talk to John. They all disappeared into the living room. Half an hour later, Bob and Sonny left. When John came back into the kitchen, I asked him what had been going on, but he shrugged and disappeared upstairs to his music room. It was never mentioned between us again, but not long afterward I heard that Bob and Sonny were divorcing. I couldn't escape the conclusion that she'd had an affair with John, although I never had any proof. Of course I knew that John might have had the odd fling with a girl when the Beatles were on tour. If any of them had had the odd lapse, well, they were only human, and it meant little. All of us Beatles women knew that girls threw themselves at the boys, but we also knew that they came home to us, so we ignored it. After all, we were getting fan letters every day saying things like, "I'm in love with your husband. He doesn't love you. He wants me, so leave him alone." Some were funny, others threatening, but either way they went into the bin, and we forgot about them. So when I began to wonder if John had had affairs with women who were around us at the time, I decided to let it go. I believed that John and I were strong enough together to come through anything, and that unless an infidelity was staring me in the face, I wouldn't ask him or look for evidence. I knew that if I tried to confront him, he would walk away, and I'd end up tormenting myself. In any case, I wasn't the sort of woman to be controlling or possessive. I knew I was the bedrock of John's stability, and that he loved me. and I let that be enough. Still, our life at home was pleasant. In a room in the attic, a basic recording studio had been thrown together. It was usually in complete disarray. Records strewn among bean bags, scribbled lyrics all over the room, recording equipment everywhere. John often disappeared there for a few hours, and later would shout downstairs, "Cyn, what are you doing? Come and listen to this." If I didn't get there immediately, he'd shout again, "Come on, Cyn, drop whatever you're doing, I need you now." "Yes, sir, okay, boss." When I got to the attic, John would be desperate for an audience for his new song. I would listen and comment, trying to help when he was stuck for a lyric. I loved all of John's music, which was evolving beyond rock and roll. He was working on tracks for their fifth album, Help, which was also to be the soundtrack to the film. John's songs were often angry, sad or challenging, but their honesty and intensity added to their appeal. I remember him writing, "You're going to lose that girl," late one night, then calling me to listen. After I was locked away with his music, I'd ask, "Fancy a bacon butty and a mug of tea?" "Perfect, you must have read my mind," he would say, and beam. Despite all that was going on around us, and my occasional unease about John and other women, we were a solid unit, happy together and amazed at our good fortune. Of course it wasn't perfect, partly because the boys were under such pressure. They were still carrying out major foreign tours every few months, as well as playing regular British concerts. And on top of the live performing, they were expected to produce a steady stream of 3 or 4 original singles a year and a couple of LPs, far more than any pop star today. John would arrive home from tours exhausted and spend the next few days more or less asleep, which meant I had constantly to keep Julian quiet and away from our bedroom. Julian missed his father when he was away and painted endless pictures for Daddy, so when he came home, Julian couldn't wait to see him. The rule was that at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, John had a wake-up call and a cup of tea. Julian, who had waited impatiently all morning to see his daddy, would go in as soon as I gave the signal and jump on John for cuddles and a chat. It was usually several days before John was back to normality. But then he was like a tornado, wanting to know about everything he'd missed and wrestling with Julian, who shadowed his every move. He'd settled down to go through the fan mail, which by then had piled up by the sackload. Julian's tiny fingers would be poking into everything. "Look, Julian," John would say, "these letters are very important. They're our bread and butter. See? This one is your breakfast, that one's your dinner, and this one is a new guitar for Daddy." After a while it would be, okay, come on, let's go for a walk in the garden and pick some flowers for Mummy. And they'd disappear for a couple of hours. John loved being with his son, but in short bursts. His moods could be unpredictable, and at times he was intolerant and impatient with Julian. On one occasion I remember him shouting at the dinner table because Julian was eating messily. I was livid and stormed, "If you were here more often, you'd realise that this is how little boys of 3 eat. Now leave him alone." I rushed upstairs in tears. The shock on Julian's face when John had erupted at him had really upset me. But rows like that were rare. I'd learned to keep away from John if he was edgy, and Julian had too. In the evening, when Julian played with his toys at our feet, John and I had dinner in the den and caught up with our news. John would say over and over again how great it was to be home. "Oh God, Cyn, this is fucking fantastic. How's your mum? Has she brought me any more goodies? You did tell her, didn't you, that if she sees anything really different, she must buy it. Doesn't matter how much it costs. Oh, and don't forget, we need loads of books for our bookcases. Tell Lil to buy old leather-bound ones. They look great." When Julian had gone to bed and Dot had gone home, the house was quiet, and we had a chance to unwind and reconnect. We were safe from intruders now, which made a big difference. The die-hard fans still camped outside the gates in all weathers, carving their names into the wood for posterity, but we felt a lot more secure. After weeks apart, me running the household, John travelling and performing, It was wonderful to be close again and to shut out the world. That was when we shared our most affectionate moments. We'd exchange roses or loving notes and cuddle up together in front of the TV. We called these special John and Cyn times, oases of loving peace in the madness of our world. I treasured them.